focused on preventing all forms of men's violence against women. MVP is the premier program in the country working with athletic groups on these issues. The multi-race mixed-gender MVP program is the first large-scale attempt to enlist high school, collegiate, and professional athletes in the fight against this violence. In 1993, Jackson Katz approached Sporting Society, a Northeastern University center, which had a history of using athletes as social change agents, with the idea of using them as role models in the prevention of men's violence against women. MVP was originally funded by FIPSE, or the Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education, to work with colleges and universities in the Boston area. Sporting Society was charged with developing a replicable model for colleges and universities to use around the country. The initial idea behind this program was that if student athletes spoke out against all forms of gender violence, they could help to affect not only within the athletic subculture, but also in the larger adolescent and young peer culture that often sees athletes as exemplars of success and leadership. The potential for athletes, in the following case male athletes, to model new behaviors for other males was powerfully demonstrated by an interesting development in, of all things, modern beer marketing history. In 1972, Miller Brewing Company bought the rights to Meister Brau Light, a beer that the small Chicago brewery had been attempting to market to women as a diet beer. Not surprisingly, the effort failed. Still, Miller's market research had shown that beer drinkers would welcome a beer that didn't fill them up, but men didn't want to drink a beer that could be seen as feminine. So Miller had a problem, because in 1972, much more so than today, concern with calories was seen as a decidedly feminine preoccupation, and in the early 1970s, men comprised an overwhelming percentage of the beer market. Their solution was to initiate an ad campaign that featured a series of macho football players and other sport icons, with Dick Butkus and Bubba Smith among the first cohort. They placed these football stars in a crowded bar surrounded with their buddies and put a light beer in their hands. The message: Dick Butkus and Bubba Smith can drink light beer, and no one is going to accuse them of being wimps. You can too. The result was that Miller Lite television commercials became among the most celebrated ads in TV history, winning Clio Awards for advertising excellence in the late 1970s. For a time, Miller Lite even became the official beer of the National Football League. This stunning shift came about because savvy marketers more than 3 decades ago figured that men would change their gendered behavior if given permission to do so by men with more status in the masculine hierarchy. In other words, if men in positions of cultural leadership would take risks and model new masculine norms, large numbers of men would likely to respond in turn by changing their attitudes and attendant behaviors, albeit, in this case, consumer behaviors. The idea that men with traditionally masculine credibility can help revise the very definition of what it means to be manly is directly related to the premise of the original sport-based multi-racial MVP program, which was the first large-scale attempt to enlist male college and high school student athletes in the fight against rape, battering, sexual assault, and all forms of men's violence against women. When men who have credibility and respect from their fellow males, as well as influence with younger males, make it clear that abusing girls and women in any way, emotionally, physically, or sexually, will not be tolerated by other men, as well as by other women, it sends a strong message that this behavior is unacceptable, and hence helps to prevent a lot of unnecessary pain and suffering. While it was initially an all-male initiative, in the second year, MVP developed a female component and is now a mixed-gender program in schools, colleges, and the sports culture. Shortly after the program's inception, we realized that the reach of the program's messages needed to be broader. If you are going to effectively address any social problem, such as poverty, racism, or sexism, everyone needs to be involved in the conversation. In 1995, MVP created a female component that mirrored the male version and utilized female athletes to work as mentors for younger females. Today, MVP has continued to evolve and utilizes men and women as co-facilitators in all of the Train the Trainer programs and mixed-gender training sessions it provides. MVP's bystander philosophy and approach has expanded to include anyone in position of influence and leadership, not just athletes. Resident life, Greeks, teachers, cross-sections of students, etc. MVP has worked with a wide variety of groups since its inception. The program has trained thousands of high school and college students, as well as educators and social service providers. MVP is the only system-wide gender violence prevention and education program in the history of the United States Marine Corps and has facilitated dozens of train-the-trainer programs across the country.